Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Village Witch podcast. My name is Avalon, and I will be your hostess this afternoon. First of all, guys, I need to apologize for the wind outside, so if you hear any background noise, it is crazy windy outside of my house right now. Just the weather has been insane. But I have a fun topic for today and a really fun announcement. I've been working on this really cool project I'm really excited for, guys, so what I want to cover today is just overall creation of a story and the elements that go into that. So when I started writing and doing all of the things that I do, the yawns begin early, guys. Grab your coffees. When I started writing and role-playing and D&D and stuff, I was amazed at how much I didn't know about creating a world and then building a story within that world, and the way everything needs to come together. And I remember going online and looking at things like character creation sheets, world building sheets, map blanks, and all of these things to help me try and keep track of what's going on in my story or with my character or in the world I'm writing. And I bought journal after journal after journal to try and keep my notes all together, and, well, that didn't go too well, but I started developing some tricks over time that have helped tremendously, and I can't really put all of this in order, because for me, there was no order. For me, I start with an idea and I build it up from there. And I will be covering this topic more in the future, with the help of some very dear friends and other authors. I know in June sometime we're hoping to look forward to a story creation interview with the author Kassie Keegans. She has been a tremendous friend to me on my journey to becoming a published fiction writer, which has been really incredible. But when I started writing my book is when I really started noticing how much needed to go into the creation of a new world and how much could be redacted should it need to. For me, I'm a very detailed writer. I need everything to connect and fit together and have a reason. So when I started planning things like new species and a new world and new creatures, and maybe there are some earth creatures in this world, I needed a reason why. Everything I did, I was like, okay, but why is this? And that led me on this whole rabbit hole. And I'm going to go down the rabbit hole with you guys today to the best of my ability, because this is really not an organized topic for me yet. But it started with where I wanted my characters to go. And that was a really backwards way to start, I think, because it has taken me longer than I care to admit to develop this world. But then I started thinking, okay, well, my characters need a reason. So I went to the species that I had created and I started to develop the species. I started thinking about things like, do these species use magic? Do they not use magic? Do they speak another language? What kind of culture do they have? Am I basing them off of human culture? And those were all really, really important questions that would help me develop the species of this world that maybe have their own government or don't have their own government. How do they govern themselves? What morals do they live by? And what history do they have with each other before humans came? And that led me to ask the questions, how did the humans coming to this planet affect them? Did it affect them? What changes were made? And how significant is that part of history? How far away is that part of history from my current plotline? And while my answer ended up being thousands of years from the time humans came to my planet to the time my plotline happens, that moment was still so prevalent in history that my plotline actually revolves around it. And again, I needed a why. The why being everything that happened before humans even came to this planet. I ended up writing this whole history based on these two species of humanoids that live on my planet. And it was really an amazing thing finding out, because once I had an idea set in my head, the planet pretty much wrote itself. All of the logical pieces, to me, fell into place. Things like, okay, I want my world to look this way, but why does it look this way? Well, because of these events. There are these tectonic events, but there's also these gods that help shape the world, and they do it in this way. And here's this historical event that caused this major landmark. And it all kind of falls into place when you start putting it together. And it made me really stop and think about the way we affect a world, like we not just as people, but we as inhabitants of a world. And this is true of the inhabitants of any world. They will make a difference on the world they live in. And so I found myself really skipping all over the place with the lore of my world. And I backtracked all the way to trying to draw up a map of the world, because I can see it in my head, but it turns out, as much as I love geography, I am not a good cartographer. And I've taken cues from several cartographers that are very, very good friends of mine. Specifically, you can find him on TikTok. His name is the Dungeon Master's Diary, and he is a phenomenal cartographer. And I was talking to him about the creation of my map, and he was like, the one thing that drives me craziest is when people are drawing a map and there's no logical explanation for why the landmarks are the way they are. The rivers need to run in a certain direction. The mountains need to be where a tectonic plate is converging, so something needs to have come together to push that land up. And it made me really stop and look at the way I was developing my world, and I ended up having to completely recreate my world based on his advice. Because he was very, very right, and to me that was an incredibly important detail that had I not spoken to him, I would have completely overlooked. So yeah, that's Dungeon Master's Diary on TikTok, and I will be taking his advice into consideration when I go inevitably to attempt to draw my map again. So I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give myself if I could go back to the very beginning is ask yourself how much of your book is logic and logic-based, and how much of the book you need solid answers for, and how much of the book can merely exist in the realm of mystery. And that's where I kind of took the easy way out and chalk it up to magic. If I couldn't explain something, I gave it a magical explanation. And to me, that's kind of, I call it the easy way out just because in my mind and in my writing, and this is not true of everybody, this is probably just me, even magic has a scientific explanation in a lot of ways, and that's what arcane studies is, in my opinion. That's what I've seen it be. Magic being the... Oh, there's a word. And I can't even think of it. I suppose you could say the corporealization of certain sciences brought to life. And I actually, when I was coming up with my world and the way it looks, and the history that defines the way it looks, I then was able to put together the species that live in that world and the cultures that they come from. And some of them are based loosely based in human culture, and some of them are loosely based in mythological culture we're relatively familiar with. And it's been a lot of fun kind of putting these creatures together and figuring out their history and letting that push the story, because my story felt, after I did that, it felt like it had so much more depth because there was more reason to it. And questions I had been asking myself, I want this certain chain of events to happen. Why would it happen this way? Well, because of these things that happened. Or because of the way the land is put together, or because of a governing choice that was made because of this series of situations. And I realized that there was a lot that I was going into depth about, and that I had probably bitten off a little more than I could chew as a first-time author, but once I had all of this put together, it was like, look at this beautiful thing that I've created. And now I'm so proud of how I've been able to put it together and all of the decisions I've been able to make, because I was asking myself these questions that I was asking more out of anxiety than anything else. I was telling myself, okay, well, what if I end up with a fan base reading my books? Because this is now so in-depth it has to be a series. There's no way in or out of that. What if I end up with a fan base and they find this loophole thing and start tearing my story apart? And that thought scared me more than anything else I had endeavored to try. Was that I was going to put so much work and thought and love and care into this story, and that something would happen and it was all going to fall apart because I didn't ask myself a question. And I have noticed that this is absolutely not true for all authors. I have read some amazing authors, especially recently, who they put that much work into their species and into some of the species' history, but they didn't feel the need to go into the whys of the world, at least yet. And I don't know, just ask yourself how much detail you're willing to leave out in your story, because it's all very personal. But I am putting together, and this is where I get into the fun announcement. This is a project I started about a week ago, and it's going to take me a couple of weeks. I started putting together in-depth, broad spectrum character and story creation sheets. And my plan is, because when I was going through and first starting as a writer, like I said, I tried getting character sheets and world building sheets, and I just couldn't find any that suited my needs with open-ended questions. They were always things like, what is your character's hair color? What is their age? What is their gender? What kind of pizza do they like? They were all super closed-ended, and I was like, well, what if my character isn't a human, and what if they don't have hair and there is no pizza on their planets? I mean, these are questions that I had to completely skip over, and I felt like I was wasting paper. So, I'm putting together a full set of antagonist, protagonist, side characters, world creation, and species creation, and storyboarding. There's going to be a whole set of in-depth, broad spectrum with open-ended questions that allow you to think of all of these things that I had to think of when I was putting my world together. I am collaborating on this with Kassie Keegans, who, like I said, I'm hoping will be able to have on the podcast sometime in the middle of June. And author Melissa Blincoe, who also has been a very good friend and a big supporter while I'm on my journey. And both of these authors have put out incredible books, you guys. I will link what I can in the description below, but go and see them. They are fantastic, and they are fun and friendly and supportive, and they deserve every bit of love and support that they get. They really do. But we have those to look forward to. And when you hone in on what you're doing with the world and the species, and if you choose to go into a language and everything, then the plot line will more or less write itself. And that, I found, going into all of those background details, I found made my plot so much easier to understand. And then I had to ask myself the big questions about my characters. Things like, how do they fall into the timeline? How old are they? What species are they? But also things like, does my character have any physical alterations? And if so, what bearing does it have on the plot line? Does it have a bearing on the plot line, or is it there because of the plot line? How is this, like, let's say your character has a tattoo. Now, this tattoo is already a distinguishing mark. That's something we know for sure. But is it just a tattoo that your character has? And they can say, oh yeah, you're looking for so-and-so person with this tattoo on their wrist. Or is it a tattoo that has a bearing on who they are? Does it have weight in the plot line? Oh, they have a tattoo that is this, this, and this because they're part of this group. Or do they have the tattoo because of the plot line? Like, oh yeah, this person was part of this group and then this thing happened and now we're facing the conflict of the story because of it. I found myself asking, how much weight does all of the little things about my character carry in the plot line? How does it affect the relationships that they make with other characters? Does my character have trauma? Was this trauma something that happened in the past before the plot happened? Does this trauma stem from the beginning of the story, and does it further the conflict, or does it have nothing to do with the conflict, but it has everything to do with who they are as a person, and how does it affect their relationships? And knowing the answers to these questions and making sure that I had these written down was a big deal when it came to me keeping track of who my character is supposed to be and how they're supposed to be changing throughout the story. And there will be pages for that as well in this set that I'm coming up with. I'm going to insist that everyone who downloads these pages, because they will be free on my Patreon, no membership required. It'll be like, download this paper, but when you do it, print 3. How does your character start? Who are they in the beginning of or in the middle of your tale? And who are they going to become? That way you can track their change throughout the series. And there will be questions like, how have they changed so far? What caused this change? What is the event, or maybe lack thereof, that caused this major change in your character? Do they revert back at some point? And one of the major things I hope to accomplish is I want to track your heroes, or any kind of protagonist, whoever your main character or main characters are. These sheets are going to allow you to track them following the hero's journey that I spoke about in my last episode. And I want to do it that way because the hero's journey really shows how a character develops through the course of their adventure. And I feel like that's a big deal, because your character going through everything is going to grow. They're going to change. And knowing where they start and knowing where they end, but also knowing where they are in the middle, is a really good way to just connect the dots. There are going to be sheets on if your character has a love interest. How does this love interest affect them? How does this love interest affect the storyline? Is this love interest a villain? Are they on the good side? And it'll be the same thing for the villain sheets. I want to leave it open-ended enough to be like, okay, is the villain of your story, is it a physical, corporeal being? Or is this the henchman or follower of an idea? And when I was thinking about that, I was thinking about one of my favorite childhood stories, and that would be the Never-Ending Story. Where in the first half of the book, and the first movie, should you be the kind of person who watched the movie and didn't read the books, they are tragically different. They are very different. So the first half of the book and the movie were very similar, in that Fantasia is being torn apart by the nothing, and the nothing is the emptiness left in the absence of the people who believe in fantastical things. It is the absence of hope and the absence of creativity that is being brought on by modernism. And the servant who serves the nothing was the wolf Gomorrah. And I loved that concept, that the antagonist was actually this driving force. It was an idea. It was something that was happening without being able to be changed by a physical altercation. And killing off Gomorrah did absolutely nothing to hinder it. But Gomorrah still had to be like almost a fully fleshed out character. So there will be sheets that follow that as well. But there are And I'm probably going to drag this series on because this has been a really important journey for me. And I'll go more into depth as the pages get written and as everything plays itself out with my book. I will keep you guys posted on that. But these are the deep questions that I ask myself when I go to make something new. Because, in my opinion, the details really seriously matter. They do. The details are so important because I like the amount of detail that goes into it, yes, but I also love being able to leave out loopholes. I try, and I'm not perfect. There are still going to be loopholes. There are still going to be moments of plot convenience, but I try to minimize those as much as possible by asking myself these questions. And I really feel like even though those things will still be there, it will help further my plot and help further my world and make it more imaginable because I went through and I made sure these details were there. What does it feel like to be there? What is the air like? How does it smell? Are there weird plants? What do they feel like? Are they poisonous? To me, these are the things that pull you into a world. I remember a few weeks ago, shortly after I finished a new series by my favorite author, Tiffany Roberts, she did a really cool thing. She went onto her Discord chat and she posted, for a limited time, she posted the Pinterest page that she put together that inspired the different plants and fruits and other things in a world in one of her series. And I went and I looked at it and I was like, this is how I imagined it. And because she took the time to do that, she took the time to find a way to flesh out these things in a physical way that she could see, it made it easier for her to describe them in her book. And I highly encourage that. If you can get your characters illustrated or put together Pinterest pages having to do with what your world might look like and even if it's just abstract ideas, color palettes, or brief sketches, do it. Because the more you can see of your world, the better you'll be able to describe it to other people. And that is tremendously important. Because that's what sucks in the people who are watching what you do, reading what you write, listening to your roleplay. When you look at all of these small little details and you find a way to really bring them to the surface, that's what creates the immersion for everybody else who is witnessing what you're doing. And that to me is an amazing and beautiful thing. I'm going to go ahead and leave the podcast there, you guys. I will announce pages as I get them written, but it could be a couple of weeks. I will, of course, link the authors I've mentioned in my bio as well as my Patreon, so that when I get these pages put out, you'll be able to go there and download them. And I hope you guys will come back to my podcast and leave comments about what you were inspired to do. I want to know about the worlds that you are creating, and I hope that my advice can help you on the way. And if you intend to do that, please hit follow so that you never miss an episode. I'm a little bit sporadic on my uploads right now because things have been a little bit crazy. I have absolutely filled my schedule and I didn't even mean to do that. But hit follow. Let me know what you guys are coming up with. Let me know what you think. And if you have any ideas, anything you want covered in the podcast or anything you want me to remember as I put these pages together, please leave it in the comments below. I love to read them, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye.